Okay, so thank you very much for having me here, and thanks, Kiana, for inviting me. I'm Sara Offenberg from Ben-Gurion University of the Negev, and let's talk about a Jewish knight in shining armor. Hopefully there's something like that. So, looking at Hebrew illuminated manuscripts, which is my field, you can see knights all over the place, or not only knights, but warriors, and make the difference between the two. And you notice them only when you're starting looking for them, but they are everywhere from the 13th to the 15th century in Western Europe. But what does it mean that we find knights in these manuscripts? So at the beginning, I thought perhaps they're all bad. I have the same joke as always. Good night, bad night. I like it, and I keep repeating it like I'm a 98-old grandpa. But I really like it because that's the way I work. I see a warrior in a Jewish manuscript, and then I think, is he a good guy or a bad guy? And I start by actually reading what is in there. But we should always think about the entire society. The Jews were living in Europe in a Christian society. So let's take a look at that. And I'm using the term chivalry from the most recent book published. You can see that I even read it. Knights usually are connected with chivalry. And chivalry was performative, and those who saw it to follow its stance did so for an audience. And this is something that we should keep in mind when we are looking at manuscripts as well, because they had an audience of readers and viewers. And chivalry began life as a set of values widely shared by an aristocratic warrior elite. So that's where the warriors come to mind. And although they operated within a Christian framework, we should remember that essentially they were secular. So with this in mind, when it comes to Hebrew illuminated manuscripts, it broadens our point of view. Jews were very much aware of this mechanism of self-representation, of social rank, and of social codes. In a sense, this broad term of chivalry might include the Jews as well, at least from a Jewish perspective, of self-belonging to a chivalric society strand, social strand. They imitated and at times even attached original adapted spiritual meaning to the borrowed symbols. And you can see some of them here. Now, in this talk today, I'll focus on a few case studies of different genres of literary works from Hebrew illuminated manuscripts produced in Ashkenaz, which are France and German lands. And I'll use the term Ashkenaz from the 13th to the 15th century. So I'll start with this, I'll go chronologically. From the Michael Mahzor, it's called Michael Mahzor because it's a prayer book held in the Michael collection at Oxford. And what we're seeing here is a liturgical poem, the initial of a liturgical poem here, for the Great Shabbos, which is the Shabbat before Passover. So it's very relevant for today. And it deals with the way we should clean our dishes before Shabbat, before Passover. Fascinating. If you read it, it's good story time. And since it's not clear enough, in order to understand it, there are so many commentaries on liturgical poems, because actually lots of liturgical poems are not that easy to understand, even in the Middle Ages. But what I was interested in, what is about the night? What does the night has to do with it? So I started by reading the entire liturgical poem, as well as the poems before that and afterwards. And then I stumbled upon the word here, the harat, which is the code for understanding the illumination, I believe. Now what we see here is a warrior knight, a horse, and a few more animals that can be explained according to the text of the liturgical poem. But I'm interested in the knight itself, why he's represented here. And as I said, it is related to the word daharat, which is converted from the word daharot, which is galloping, of horse gallops, from Judges. Now, it's not enough to just see one word and connect it to the illustration, but as I said, we should read also commentaries on this liturgical poem. And in most manuscripts, and we have remained 12 commentaries on this specific liturgical poem from Ashkenaz, and in most manuscripts of the Piyut's commentary, the word harat, galloping, is the object of an elaborate explanation, which includes the biblical quotation and comments that the Abirim, which are knights, are Abirei Israel, the knights of Israel. That is, the knights of Israel who are galloping with one another. And here it's in Hebrew, Midaharot Daharot Abirav. So the knight we are seeing here is actually a Jewish knight. It's Israel, it's the knights of Israel. So here we have a positive one. And it's just something that I want to start with, so just to get a glimpse of how I'm working, and hopefully you'll agree with me. Okay. And now for something that I'm just started working on it, even though I am very much well familiar with this manuscript. It's called the London Miscellany, or the North French Hebrew Illuminated Miscellany. It was produced in northern France around 1280. And it's a very large book. Well, it's small, but it has over 700 pages. And it contains various texts, over 80 different texts. And among others, we see this one, which is the Aramaic translation of the Haftorah for the first day of Passover. So today is the first day of Passover, and the Haftarah is the Torah portion of that we read on this day. And what you see here is the translation into Aramaic. Long sentences, but what does the night has to do with it? Okay, so the first thing we should do is look at the actual Haftarah and how it is portrayed in this specific manuscript, in the same manuscript. A few pages before that, we see this. Here it is mentioned that these are the Haftarah, the Torah portion readings for Passover. And it is from Joshua. At that time, the Lord said to Joshua, make flint knives for yourselves, and again circumcise the children of Israel a second time. Usually in the audience, people go like, ouch, like this. And a few sentences later, once when Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing before him, drawn sword in hand. Joshua went up to him and asked him, are you one of us or our enemy? One of our enemies. So for me, it's the same question. Are you a good knight or a bad knight? Okay, so if we think about the swords, we can say, okay, so it can be a sort of flint knives. Okay, it could be one explanation. And Joshua was just before the Battle of Jericho, so it makes sense that he is wearing knightly gear. You can see that he even has full knightly gear, except for a helmet. But the dragon, what has the dragon to have to do with this? I have a lot of questions. Usually when we see a dragon and a knight, most of us think of Saint George slaying the dragon, but here it doesn't make much sense since it's a Jewish manuscript, and even though they are copying from Christian manuscript, I thought perhaps there is something more to that. Now, I must say that it doesn't mean that every illustration or something in the margins obviously has something that is connected to the text, but sometimes it does. And I think here it does. It is an associated motive for something that is larger and understood by the Jews at the time. And in order to explain this, I'm going to a later manuscript, also from Ashkenaz, but from the 15th century. And it's a Haggadah. It's read on Passover Eve. It's the second Nuremberg Haggadah, 15th century, also Ashkenaz, studied by my supervisor, Professor Katrin Kochman-Appel. And you can see here on the right, sort of a dragon eating Moses. And it is based on the Exodus 4, when Zipporah and Moses were on their way. Now, the illustrations have put text just above them, and it is explained here, according to Rashi's commentary, that the angel that came before them, before Moses, the angel became a kind of serpent and swallowed him. Now, there's an idea that sometimes angels, or the angel of death, is portrayed as a serpent or as a dragon. So he tried to swallow Moses from his head to his thigh, and also again swallowed him from his legs to that place. And then his wife Zipporah thus understood that this had happened on account of the delay in the circumcision of her son. So that's why she just took out the knife and circumcised their boys. So when we're looking at a dragon eating Moses, or the illustration from the London Miscellany, we actually understand that by circumcising the people of Israel, it's like fighting the dragon, which means the dragon is a representative, it represents the angel of death, the actual dragon. So here for the Ashkenazi Jews, even though it was made in France, this manuscript is connected to the Hasidei Ashkenaz, to the German Pietists movement. The ideas of other midrashim, of other commentaries, such as Rashi's commentary, were very much part of their intellectual world. So they actually just slayed the dragon. That's why it is like that. Okay. I'm not very much into it. I could just explain the entire thing according to Disney or other movies. Going back to this one, if we look at the entire opening of the London Miscellany, where the Haftarah for Passover is written, and we see here the fighting figures, and here is the part from Joshua, we can explain the swords from another source, not only related to slaying the dragon or circumcision, but according to what is written here. That's at the bottom and around the main text. And it's from Psalms. And it mentions swords. It was not by their sword that they took the land. So, it is not my sword that gives me victory. So the emphasis here is that the Lord saves Israel or David or other guys, and it's not by the power of the sword. So the sword here is not a motive that of salvation, on the contrary. And what we are seeing here is an early example of fighting with sword and buckler. And buckler is a sort of a round shield, a very small round shield of a specific type. I don't know, I guess some of you in the audience are familiar with this, some of you aren't, so I'll just talk a bit about it. So, when we are looking at sword and buckler, for most people, most scholars of medieval art or medieval fighting, we think of this manuscript. A manuscript that is now in the house at Leeds, manuscript 133, which is a manual for fighting with sword and buckler. And these are the latest editions. I highly recommend them. You have it here. So what we have here is the earliest copy of a manual of fighting with sword and buckler from the 1320s. What I would like to talk about in the next few minutes is about this thing. This manuscript, it's a Hebrew illustrated manuscript of the Bible. And here we have again fighting people with sword and buckler, but it is earlier than the Christian one. It is from 1304. And if any of you heard by chance my talk about 2.5 months ago in the National Library, sorry, I'll just repeat some of the things. So this manuscript, it's a 3-volume manuscript, a huge Bible, produced in German lands, Ashkenaz, in 1304. And what we see here, it is all of the decoration are Masora figurata, which are, or just micrography, which is figurative or just plain floral decorations made here at the bottom of the page. And it is made out of the script of the Mesorah, which explains the way you should pronunciate the Bible reading. And I'll go into details later. So, now I should mention that the most cutting edge study research is presently being conducted by a group headed by Professor Dr. Hannah Liss from Heidelberg Center of Jewish Studies. And that's their website. It's fantastic. They are working on it. It's a 12 years research project and it's amazing. But the specific manuscript that I'm going to talk about is not part of this project. So I had something to contribute. I hope so. Okay. So this opening of the pages, we see on both sides warriors. I won't call them knights because they are not. And it is the text from Jeremiah. So what I wish to demonstrate here is that the iconography of the Masora figurata, the figures, was adapted from German fight books, which are books of instructions, usually with illustrations dealing with the fencing arts. Now, the genre of fight books flourished in the late Middle Ages, mainly in the German-speaking lands, and we have some 90 surviving manuscripts. But it's amazing that out of 36 German fencing masters mentioned by name, it is remarkable that 3 of them are described as Jews. And the most known one is Negev, and you can see here, that's the edition that I always go back to. These are the main research on the subject, the latest ones. The journal Acta Periodica Dualatorum. This is the latest issue, and I'm so thrilled to say that in the next issue that will come out in May, I'm publishing an article there on this subject. So I'm just super excited. And you don't understand what little dance I made when I got accepted. Okay, just me. Okay, and Late Medieval and Early Modern Fight Books. It's a wonderful book, and of course, don't forget the website. Just go and browse through it. It's marvelous. So I'm using these studies in order to understand a bit my manuscripts. Without them, I couldn't understand anything. So the portrayal of the fighting man in the Ashkenazi Bible from 1304 predates the earliest illuminated fencing manual, which is Leeds 133, probably from Franconia around 1320. And it is also known for the woman at the end who fights and actually wins the battle. So for people who are familiar with the Leeds manuscript, they're also familiar with this manuscript, the Codex Manesse, produced in Zurich around 1320-ish, but perhaps earlier. This seems it was produced for a long period, you can see from 1300 to 1340. And the iconography of the fighting figures is very much similar to the one in the Leeds manuscript. Now, from the same time and place, from Zurich, we have another Hebrew manuscript, which portrays also fighting with sword and buckler, and it is a specific type of fighting. I should stress that. It's not just, well, I'll just get some shield and a sword. And on this subject, Saricha Lebeni wrote on this manuscript, as well as the related manuscript, which is the tripartite Mahzor. And you can see here as well, fighting figure, it's here, with sword and buckler. So we have a Hebrew illuminated manuscripts from the same time and place of the Codex Manesse and the Leeds manuscript from even the area of the Codex Manesse. But the one I'm interested in is earlier. So it just says that my point here is that in this Hebrew manuscript, this one, we can see earlier traditions that, throughout time just got lost or just appeared again only in the manuscript that survived from till our days, only from later on. But I should stress again and again, it's not as if the Christian manuscripts copied from Jewish manuscripts, it was the other way around. Yeah? Jews copied from their neighbors, from the Christians. It is interesting to see what they copied. So the micrography forming verses are from Jeremiah. Let's start by looking at the verses themselves, the images. And most of the words are related to Jeremiah 11:22. The young man shall die by the sword. So the sword is stressed again and again. And it is extremely important here because it relates the text and the image. And the image itself is made of different verses of the Masorah, the way that we should pronounce it, the main text. You can see here that it's from different parts of the Bible. It's from Samuel, Ezekiel, Isaiah, etc. I just put some color on it. And again, on the second one as well. But what does it mean? Why should they portray like that? Now, the figures with the swords, as the text implied, were designed to arouse fear in the hearts of the viewers, as they may reflect fear of the Christian neighbors. And a thing that I haven't said so far is that fighting with sword and buckler isn't a sort of fighting of the nobility. It is related also for the lower, sort of lower strata of the society. So for the Jews living in urban space, Europe, Germany, they were afraid of their neighbors using a sword and buckler. Now it is illustrated also in a Christian manuscript where you can see the difference between knights and regular warriors holding sword and buckler. It is a different type of fight and weapons. What were they so afraid of? The manuscript was produced only 6 years after the 1298 riots known as the Rheinfleisch massacres, which throughout these riots, hundreds of Jews were massacred, were murdered. So we may find in this micrography an echo of the pogrom's outcome, especially as the text of Jeremiah and the micrography forming verses tell of severe judgment and harsh prophecy. And the emphasis is on the sword that brings upon death. So when looking at this Hebrew manuscript, for scholars such as myself studying Hebrew illuminated manuscript and Jewish-Christian relations, it is interesting because we can see the way they reflect their fear of their neighbors, and at the same time, they also copied from them the same iconography, probably using model books, exemplar books. And for scholars of military stuff, we can use manuscript like this, Hebrew manuscript, to see earlier portraits, earlier than the Leeds manuscript, displaying fighting with sword and buckler. And it is already started by other scholars such as Cornelius Berthold, who I'm so grateful that he shared his unpublished paper yet unpublished, soon to be published. He shared it with me before, and he already saw some earlier examples also in Hebrew illuminated manuscripts. Let's lighten things up. Let's go to Haggadah. And here we're going to the 15th century, also Ashkenaz. This is part of the reading, which usually the kids are like to read during Passover Eve. And these are about the 4 sons, the scholar, the smart one, the wicked, the innocent, and the one who doesn't know how to ask. Now, usually the 4 sons are portrayed in one next to the other or in the same proportion. But here in this manuscript, now held at the John Rylands University library, you can see that the wise son is smaller. The wicked son, which I'll address in a minute, he is larger than life, larger than the text, and he's the most important one here. And we should say that throughout the Middle Ages, usually the wicked son is portrayed as a warrior, as a knight. And the third one, the innocent one, is portrayed with Joker's, with the fool's hat. Now this one. At first glance, we see a knight. He has an armor on it. He even has a crown instead of a helmet, but he's wicked. He even has a cape, which makes me reminded of the Dark Knight. That's what comes to my mind. He has a sword, but is a specific type of sword. It's a sword that was used by all classes, not only noble knights, as it hints at a lesser rank of a warrior. It is a sort of a way to make him look a bit ridiculous, because his upper gear is more like a knight, but lower, it's of a lower status. And I guess you already noticed that his stockings are falling. That is part of the thing that make him look so ridiculous. And in some of the literature, we find the idea of the manly legs and the knightly legs of warriors with cuts in their pants, so that they show that they were in the battlefield. But here it goes to the absurd, because they fall down. It's just like they took his trousers off. Now, in another text in the same manuscript, in the same Haggadah, we see a commentary on the word nechar, which is foreigner, and it is based on Onkelos' translation of Exodus, where the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, "This is the law of Passover offering, no foreigner shall eat it." So Onkelos explained that the foreigner was the son that converted. Now in our manuscript, next to the main text, we see that the commentary goes on to say that he, the foreigner, is like the wicked son who converted. Thus the image here might well be a caricature of an apostate Jew. He's not just wicked, he's wicked because he converted to Christianity. And it is related to the entire theme of the illustrations in this Haggadah. So that's another bad night. But I'd like to finish with something, with this. And it's a Bible from Ashkenaz as well, from the 15th century. And here we have the opening of Numbers. It's the text of, here's the text of the Bible, and here's Rashi's commentary on it. And we see two knights. Here. You see two knights holding pennons, their swords, and their shields. And before talking about them, let's just take a quick look at Christian manuscript portraying the same idea of the camps of the Israelites, where they were camping according to their tribes from 4 parts of around north, south, east, and west, around the Ark of Covenant. And it is portrayed in the same manner also in an earlier manuscript from Ashkenaz, also around Lake Constance region here. And Sorichel Leveini wrote about it, as well as Mark Epstein, which I used his drawing here, of the camps of Israel, of the tribes from all 4 corners. And here I just want to say that they have only the pennons, but without any weapons. What we see in this manuscript from the 15th century, there are only 2 knights, and they are fully armed. We'll go into that. Now, what they are wearing is Italian armor. It is complete Italian armor of the time, including the jupon, everything on the bassinet, every part of an Italian armor of that time is illustrated here. And for me, it is interesting, the details. I like it that they go into specific details to portray the knights here, which are the knights of Israel, of the people of Israel. And I'll just say that there is a difference between the German gear and Italian armor. But at that time, even though it was produced in Germany, they used also Italian armor. The German one is more strict. So the knight on the left bears an oval shield, painted red with a Jewish hat on in the center. And the red is connected to Rashi's commentary of the tribe of Reuben, and it goes much beyond the scope of this lecture. Now here's a Jewish hat at the center, and the same appears on the pennons. I hope you can see them here. It's a specific Jewish hat with the topping here. Now, although initially intended by Christian authorities as a derogatory sign, over the years the Jewish hat became so closely associated to Jewish male public attire that it was appropriated by Jews and became a symbol of Jewish pride. That much that they used the same symbol to put this on their shield and pennons, not only in illustrated manuscript, but also we know that from seals that they use the Jewish hat as part of their symbols. And yet, what I'm curious about, not only in this manuscript, but in others that I studied as well throughout the years, is the details. What does it matter if they have their vendor here and we see the chainmail and every little part of it? Were they wearing them or not? Okay, so in order to conclude some of my assumptions, for the Jewish patrons, this self-identification elevated their status, even if only in their own eyes, and informs us about the way they viewed their surrounding society and themselves within its social and spiritual strands. Beyond the interest of fighting reference to Jews in German fight books, it is extremely important that they are positioned in such prominent places of fancy masters, and I mean like this one. Thus, we may assume that the image found in some of the images found in Hebrew illuminated manuscripts are not so far-fetched in terms of Jewish knights, or at least for some Jews, or the way they perceive themselves. It may be that the patrons of some manuscripts containing images of knights in a positive context belonged not only to an intellectual elite, but also to a social rank of some martial arts masters, glorifying their skills and knowledge. However, and it is important to stress this out, we should stress that our conclusion here could not be implicated for all portrayals of warriors and knights in Jewish art, but each work of art should be studied in depth and then reach a conclusion. And as in Christian society, the visual aspects of the social stratum is very much present for some Jewish patrons, describing medieval Jewish connotations between social honors gained in battlefield and a present Jewish identity may provide the patron of the glory he could not fully earn in the dominant society. Thank you. These are the knights. I see there's something in the chat. Should I? Ooh, that's a lot. Okay, so this has been recorded. Is there a list of sources somewhere? I've been trying to write this down. Some of the things I already published in my book. which is called Up in Arms. And should have brought it here. It's already back there. So it's called Up in Arms, or just look for Sara Offenberg in the Cherub Press. It's part of Cherub Press. And other stuff, it's just under process. Thank you very much. Any questions? Yes. Hi.
Hi, Sara. Good to see you. And so nice to hear your talk. It's great to see what you're working on. I have a question about the Northern French Miscellany, or in general, I guess I have questions about the illuminators and the collaboration between the illuminators and the patrons. So the patrons were Jewish, but what do you say about the illuminators, who I only can really speak to the Northern French Miscellany, which I learned mostly from you in your book, that they were to a large part Christian. Yep. So how do you think that interreligious collaboration, when it came to Jewish material culture, might have influenced the night and the meaning behind it, and the dragon, maybe?
I think it worked just as in other manuscripts, in other workshops. I should say the London Miscellany was produced in Paris, in the most noble workshops, Christian workshops. And there was a person on behalf of the patron, perhaps the scribe, Benjamin the scribe, perhaps, we don't know, that instructed the illuminators what to illustrate. And just as in Christian manuscripts, where the patron sometimes even draw something like that, small drawing, or just give orders what to illustrate. But most of the images are based on Christian ideas, except for, as you know, when they change the iconography. When something is different, there we can see that there was actually the hand, or at least the saying of the patron, that told, here I want to see this thing and not that. And the best example is the Kohen Gadol with the large crown instead of the mitre, or the binding of Isaac, which is bounded by both arms and legs, but only one arm and one leg. Mm-hmm. So I think for them it was part of the way they lived. It's not so separated as we think of it.
And you don't think that the Christian illuminators may have had influence on how things may have looked, or I guess they don't necessarily have an influence on the meaning, but don't you think they could go rogue and just kind of draw a dragon, or like how to where
sometimes, yeah, I think so, yeah. Just like in the name of the world, but when they did so, the best example is the Mishneh Torah from the Kaufman collection, which Evelyn Cohen studied, and she showed that by ultraviolet lighting, you can see that it was drawn in the beginning just as if Jesus is giving the law to Moses, and afterwards it was painted over. So if it had some religious ideas, but for example, in the margins, when it comes to Balak's story or something like that, you can see the black bird. It is at most times related to the text. But the dragon, only because of the second mirror map Haggadah, thanks to Kevin. That's something that aroused my associative thinking. So I think that's the way they were probably thinking.
I do have another question, if I can ask. So when it comes to chivalric culture, there's there's you focused a lot on the knights, and you've really illuminated what's going on there. Have you looked into at all the women in chivalric culture? And I know we've talked about this before, but like the noble women in the illuminations, and can you speak at all to matters of gender or any new insights that you've had lately?
The only thing in the latest Haggadah I showed from the Ryans with the wicked son, I focused on the patron, on the woman patron there, but not in a chivalric way, but she is noble. She is noble. And when it comes to ecclesia and synagogue, that's where you can find the noble ecclesia and the humble synagogue, the broken one. But both are portrayed in a more aristocratic way. But it's something that I haven't gone into it. So that's on you.
I know, we have to talk about it. We have to catch up. I'm gonna write you an email.
Yeah.
Great.
If there aren't any questions, I think we can wrap it up. Thank you. Thank you so much.
This has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for presenting, and I had a great time. I learned a lot, and this has been fantastic. So we'll process this recording. We're going to put it up on Toda, and we'll have links to some sources, your book, anything else that's relevant, and so we'll have a transcript as well.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Sara.
Bye.